Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm finishing off the last of the Patreon drawing request series. I'd like to stress that this isn't really something that I'd normally draw, but it's just something that my patrons requested. It's just something kind of weird. Last time that I worked on this image, I invited my patrons to participate by coming up with some sort of story if they wanted to, or some kind of narration for this little one-page comic strip, but unfortunately no one did, so I went ahead and actually wrote one in. It's nothing special, nothing amazing, and the way it's written, I think it could be a bit confusing, but if it were spelt out anymore, then I think it would be less classy. It's not really the direction that I kind of want my channel to go towards. I mean, my sense of humor gets pretty freaking weird, but I don't really think that spelling something like that out is something that I want. Anyways, it was difficult for me to sit down and finish this image. Just get started on it at the beginning of the week to get this thing done. I'll be honest about that. I really didn't want to draw this at all, and it felt like an obligation, just something that just was draining on my soul. But it was an exercise, I guess. Because actually, once I actually sat down and committed to it, after the first 30 minutes of hating life, eventually I fell into the moment of zen that the drawing experience tends to put me into. And there were even times where I just wasn't happy with some of the coloring work, and even something that I drew out previously. I completely redrew that whole panel, and completely redid some of the coloring work, even though I may have spent 30 minutes to an hour possibly on it. So although I didn't really care too much about the image, the comic strip, I at least cared about the quality of my work to make sure that it was at least something that looked presentable enough for my patrons. I care enough about my patrons to make sure that they're getting something that they might be paying for. One thing that I think was difficult while making this little comic strip was the fact that I haven't practiced drawing this character that much, and making sure that he looked the same from panel to panel, making sure that he was on model, that was kind of a struggle, and I'm not sure if I ever really succeeded with making him look just right from panel to panel. If I had a whole comic book to work on, I'm sure that I'd have a series of character models that I'd be drawing and I'd work off of in order to have enough practice drawing this dude, but when it's all said and done, it's just a one-page comic strip that I don't have any plans to ever revisit. So all of that work didn't seem all that necessary for me to reach the end conclusion. He's the only character in the scene. If there were multiple male characters in the scene, maybe I might actually have focused on making sure that they looked the same from panel to panel. But I felt like it was pretty dang clear that since he's the only character, that it didn't really matter so much for the scene. Now, some people have left some comments about how much they don't really like me mentioning my patrons and my Patreon, but I've done this YouTube thing for like 3 years now. 2 of those years I never saw a penny from all of this work at all. Early on, YouTube was saying that I was getting money, but it wasn't ever enough for me to fill out any type of tax forms, to register as a subcontractor and get paid before YouTube actually changed its terms of service. That change made it so that I needed to get 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 minutes watched. So, like I said, it was only until December of 2019 that I finally started getting something like $30 a month for the equivalent of having a second job's worth of work for 2 years of work, okay? I understand how some viewers may not enjoy hearing about ways to promote their favorite content, but if you're getting it for free, you have nothing to really complain about. At least that's where I'm standing. I mean, you're not putting out the work in order to output these videos at all. I mean, not even a little bit. It's all me trying to output all of this, and it's a lot of work. And keep in mind, there's not any paywall for any of my content at all. And there's really no moral high ground that a person can really stand on in order to say,
"You shouldn't find ways of making money for your hard work."
That statement makes no sense to me. And of course, these people don't really feel like that's what they're saying, but that's exactly what they're saying. And I just want to make it clear that, I'm not going to stop mentioning my patrons, and I'm not really going to stop saying, hey, this is a way that you can promote my artwork. Most of the time when I mention that I even have a Patreon, it's at the end of my videos, and that's a segment of my videos that no one even watches. I don't even say, hey, like, share, and subscribe until the very end of my videos. where no one is actually watching any of that. So as far as being annoying with this point, with all of the self-promotion and such like that, I've actually been pretty mild compared to a lot of other people. I mean, a person can make just about any argument to support just about any idea out there, but in the end, any protest about how someone shouldn't be paid for their work is kind of selfish, and it doesn't make any sense at all. Given that this is kind of a dog-eat-dog world, to suggest that somebody shouldn't get paid for their hard work, it's kind of an oxymoron. It's like asking people to sell merchandise for free. I could come up with some silly protest and make it sound all morally haughty and all that as to how and why Walmart is a sellout for requiring money from their customers, and how I should be allowed to walk in, take whatever I want for free because maybe I feel entitled to that. I could actually make an argument that sounds even morally virtuous as to why that's the case. But since it sounds all morally upright, doesn't really make it so. Go on to Twitter and you'll see exactly what I mean. Most people would view this behavior as being selfish, but once it comes to YouTube content creation, some people seem to think that suddenly the roles reverse, things change. Everyone should get something for nothing, basically. And I'm not mad about receiving comments like this, it's just I'm not gonna stop mentioning my Patreon or my patrons from time to time. And like I said, there's not a paywall to any of my educational content or for any of my other content. So as of right now, all I ask for most of you is just please watch my videos without an ad blocker. Maybe if you'd like, go ahead and share and subscribe. And if you'd ever consider supporting the work that I do beyond just watching through a commercial here and there, feel free to join me on Patreon. And even then, I'm not really saying you have to, I'm not really throwing it in your face all that often. Right now, some of my content has been focused primarily on speed painting because I've been building my portfolio for my website, and I'm hoping that this year, 2020, I'm going to wind up launching a website. Generally, 2020 is going to center on me building the infrastructure that I need in order to start selling products like brush packs, kit bashing kits for Blender, coloring book, things like that. So I think there's probably going to be a bit less educational content for 2020 than there has been in the previous years. But I haven't abandoned it entirely. I have every intention of continuing with my educational content. It's always a nagging sensation in the back of my head saying, hey, I need to start teaching 2-point perspective in the Teach Me to Draw playlist. But back to talking about the image here again. I took 2 separate attempts at the last panel of the comic strip. The main issue was where I decided to color the directional lighting the first time around. It just didn't match what I initially had in the 3D model or what I had initially drawn out. But one of the cool things about playing around with light when you're coloring with blending modes is that you can assign your brush to both erase and add light. You don't have to use the eraser at all when you're working with the blending modes. And if you have your brush set to a value that's at such a degree that it can partially erase some of the light, it can make removing the lighting a bit less in your face with the contrasts and such. But you're able to add subtle details with the shades of gray, especially when I'm working on the coconut tree. You can see how it cuts out the bright lights, but where I didn't have much light, since my brush was set to a gray value, it adds reflected light. That was interesting to me. So basically, in one brush stroke, I'm removing light and placing a shadow, and in the other areas, I'm adding reflected light. Again, this is in one brush stroke, adding and removing light at the same time. This is kind of cool. This is something that I never really considered that much. If you were working with physical materials, you would have to do multiple steps in order to accomplish that sort of thing. It'd be more than just 2 brush strokes, it'd be a little bit of mixing paint to get this sort of effect. And recently I've been researching other artists and how they've been using this technique, coloring their images with gradient maps. And some of them have found ways of simplifying the layers panel and such like that, even more than how I've actually been working, which is kind of cool. And I'm eager to try all of that stuff out. All of this stuff that I'm learning. There's a couple of directions that I want to go with my artwork, but I don't think that I'll ever fully abandon working with line work. However, I do think that I'm going to put efforts towards getting rid of the line work when I start working on either the coloring process or applying grayscale. I sort of want a more painterly look, but I also don't want this to get to the point where it slows me down. So finding a workflow that seems to be the best of both worlds is pretty much the goal. I like copying reality, but I've also enjoyed a bit more of a comic book style. So although I'm talking about gravitating towards a more painterly style, I don't think I'll ever abandon the more flashy look that I try to throw out there. I think every artist does this to some extent, because it not only helps an artist nail down the best workflow, but it also helps the artist evolve and get better. There have been a few times where I've approached an image and I go through each step really procedurally, and I somewhat feel if you're not challenging yourself at all, then you're not growing as an artist. And most of the time, the procedural drawings wind up being the worst images that you feel like you've made in years. The ones where it feels like you're just drawing lines, or feels the most like paint by numbers with the layers panel, or when everything is reduced down to just step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you're just done with the image. I don't really know how to really communicate what I'm trying to say right now, because it's not actually bad to have, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's just when it feels procedural, like you've done it a million times, with no growth, no progress, nothing new. I think that's where it's a problem. But I think that when you are drawing everything in a way where you feel like you can say, I know exactly how to draw this, I've nailed down the perfect workflow, and you're somewhat playing it safe, you're just kind of sitting there stagnant when you kind of feel that way. And this happens with every artist, regardless of what level you're at. And the easiest way to notice this sort of behavior or feeling is when you look at a newbie artist's artwork, when every single picture that they've drawn is a character standing there staring at the camera. But when you've actually spent the time to notice things out of your reference, built a visual library, learned a bit about anatomy and figure drawing, learned perspective, that's where people are less likely to notice your failings as an artist, but when you're settling right back into your old habits as an artist. The more experienced artist's version of drawing a character standing there staring at the camera, basically. We've all been there, where we're drawing the character standing there staring at the camera, and where it just seems like it's just too daunting to draw anything else. So what do? We just start drawing a character standing there staring at the camera again a lot of the time, and that's a problem. Since we've all been there, we know when we're settling into that same habit. Other people may not see it, but you as the artist do know. When you're a newbie, everyone sees it, but when you're more experienced, you're oftentimes the only person that sees it. And though I've mentioned this in a previous video, I think some of that is the line work for me. I leave it in throughout the entire process, all the way to the final image. And though it can look kind of cool on occasion, other times it just looks like garbage, because I wind up having cartoon visuals with realistic lighting and shadow, and it creates this uncanny effect. Things just drift into uncanny valley. So I might have a few images in the near future where I have a couple of near misses until I finally reach where I want to get to. But I know that I'll get there, because it's not like I'm just going to stop drawing. I mean, I'm just going to continue drawing, and it's inevitable that I'm going to be experimenting with it. I always experiment with my artwork. It may take me some time to notice, hey, maybe I should start experimenting with variously other things because it's causing a problem at this point. But yeah, and so here's the final image. So I'm just going to go ahead and act out the scene a little bit here.
I thought this would be a normal vacation. I was wrong. Why God would make such an abomination, I don't know. But by God, if it doesn't breathe, it shouldn't have the equipment to procreate.
So it's stupid. If you need it to be spelled out, like the plot, why he's doing what he's doing, if you need it spelled out more, I'm not going to give more of an explanation because, like I said, it's not very classy. But that's it. That's the story that I came up with. This is the image that I came up with. I think it came out looking pretty good, actually. Anyways, guys, if you'd like to support this channel, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to get more notifications from me, feel free to click on the bell, or go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Link is supplied in the video description below. If you'd like to have more participation with my community, there's a link to my Discord in the video description below. If you'd like to support my channel, there's an image of my mascot in the upper right corner of the screen right now. It leads to my Patreon. If you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.